Secondly, I think he'd say, don't neglect the thoughtful, careful selection and development of your leadership. That also is part of the earliest church's work. Jesus didn't start a church. Jesus was a teacher, and people followed him. He was one among many teachers. And there were lots of folks out there, charismatic leaders of various stripes, who had followers. It was the apostles who started the church, who started this organization that slowly grew out and became independent of Judaism. And all of that change requires thoughtful development. The apostles had to make some decisions about how the church would be led and who would do the leading. And they had to do some discernment. They had to take a breath and think about it instead of letting everything go helter-skelter. And this is such a moment for this congregation. We are in discernment, and that's normal. Happened in the first chapters of Acts. So take your time and breathe, Stephen would say. Do your discernment, and know that both the identification of the needs of the community and the identification of the appropriate leadership for that community is part of your work. Take it seriously. I think Stephen would also say, that's kind of, I just kind of did the company man piece of the conversation, but he'd also say, think like a deacon. I think there are good diaconal instincts here. If Stephen were a member of this congregation, I think he'd be hanging out at senior nutrition, and he probably would have been at the blood drive, and he'd probably want to be a member of the community of hope and probably be a Eucharistic minister taking communion to the sick, and he'd be working to make room for more families. So I think he'd enjoy being a member of this congregation, and he'd be busy. But our bishop says that the deacon's job is to be a little bit entrepreneurial. That deacons by temperament have restless hearts. And the bishop says the deacon's job really, in a nutshell, is to find trouble and bring it back to the church. So I think Stephen would say, are we looking for trouble? Are we stretching ourselves? Are we really asking, who is it out there in our community that needs support? Where is the hunger in Longview? Where in the world does the church need to be responding with generosity? And what wisdom is there in the world that the church is missing? Deacons always stand on those boundaries so that when we are doing our discernment, we do not just collect data from within. That's very dangerous. If we only collect data from within, then we're just perpetuating a club. Maybe even a dangerous club. And certainly we'll be doomed to die, frankly, and deserve that death. Not in a good way, not a martyr's death, just a slow attrition sort of fade away. But Stephen says, pay attention to the world. Look at where the hunger is, where the injustice is, where the community can be supported and be relevant to the community in which you live. And take risks. Take risks. It's okay. Do something big. Dream, imagine. Love large. I think I quoted Frederick Buechner a couple weeks ago and said that, and I never say it exactly right, but he basically says that when you're seeking your vocation, your purpose on the planet, then you have to look at the two things. You look at what gives you great joy. You look at that thing that you cannot help but do because it's so important to you. And you look at the world's great needs. So it's not just a narcissism of what I'd like and what I'm good at. Nor is it a dreary duty. You know, I've got to go do something important, I guess. That's not sustainable. But the discernment is, where does our great gift and the world's need meet? And in that place is our vocation. And that is the place that Stephen would ask not only every individual in this congregation to go, but this congregation as a body. What are our gifts? We will only know that by going out into the marketplace and understanding what the world is about, too, in relationship to the church. It's a vital conversation, and we are called to do that work. I'm thinking about that song that we sang just moments ago. Father, I put my life in your hands. That has been the song of the ages, of all who would seek God and all who would follow, and all who would be God's servants and instruments on this planet for good. So my prayer today is that we would listen to what Stephen would say for us, and that in that spirit we would put our lives in God's hands. Amen.